Everything was ready for the most important signing of a pharmaceutical tycoon's career, but a 7-year-old girl whispered, "This formula is a fraud." With a simple calculation on her phone, she exposed a multi-million error in front of everyone. What the millionaire did next surprised everyone present. The autumn rain pelted against the tall windows of La Maison, one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the hushed conversations inside. In a private dining room, Robert Thornton surveyed the scene with calculated satisfaction. At 62, the silver-haired pharmaceutical tycoon had orchestrated countless deals throughout his career, but none as significant as the one about to be signed tonight. The mahogany table was surrounded by executives in tailored suits, their expressions a careful blend of excitement and professional restraint. Legal documents were arranged in neat stacks, waiting for signatures that would seal the largest pharmaceutical merger in Massachusetts history. Thornchem Pharmaceuticals was about to be absorbed into the global giant Nexa Health, a move that would multiply its valuation exponentially. "Gentlemen and ladies," Robert raised his crystal glass, "tonight marks not just a business transaction but a legacy secured." James Davidson, his chief financial officer, nodded with the confidence of someone who had vetted every decimal point in the 100-page agreement. The Nexa Health executives smiled, especially their CEO Marcus Powell, whose reputation for aggressive acquisition strategies was well known throughout the industry. What none of them noticed was the small figure who had slipped into the room, behind a server, a thin girl with dark curly hair and serious eyes that seemed too old for her 7-year-old face. Lily Walker wasn't supposed to be there. She should have been in the staff break room where her mother Sarah had set her up with homework while finishing her shift as part of the catering staff. But Lily had grown bored with her assignments. They were always too easy, and had wandered out following the scent of chocolate souffle and the sound of important voices. She now stood by the dessert cart, her eyes drawn to the spreadsheets visible on an open laptop. As Marcus Powell began outlining the 5-year growth projections that justified the acquisition price, Lily tilted her head, her brow furrowing. She moved closer to the table, seemingly invisible to the adults engrossed in their negotiations. The compounded annual growth rate of 7.4% applied to the adjusted EBITDA gives us the valuation framework you see on page 42, Powell explained smoothly. Our offer represents a premium of 28% over current market value, which I think we can all agree is more than generous. Lily's small hand reached out toward the laptop, her finger tracing invisible calculations in the air. Something wasn't right. The numbers didn't flow the way they should. "Excuse me," her voice came out small but clear, causing conversation to halt abruptly, "but I think there's a mistake." All heads turned toward the child, expressions ranging from confusion to annoyance. Robert Thornton recognized her as the daughter of one of the catering staff members, but couldn't recall her name. "Young lady, this is a private meeting," James Davidson said firmly. "Please wait outside." But Lily, with the singular focus that had always both fascinated and worried her mother, continued, "The growth formula is wrong. You're using a simple multiplication each year instead of a true compound formula." The room fell silent. Marcus Powell's smile froze in place. "What did you say?" Robert asked, his voice soft with curiosity rather than anger. Lily approached the table, seemingly unaware of the breach in protocol. "May I?" she asked, pointing to the calculator app on James's phone. Too stunned to refuse, James handed her the device. Lily's fingers moved quickly, inputting a series of numbers. Then she turned the screen toward the adults. "If you use the right exponential formula, the growth looks like this," she explained. "The compounded value is much higher than what's in your papers, I think almost 40% more." Robert's heart began to race. If this child was correct, the acquisition offer was severely undervaluing his company by hundreds of millions. Marcus Powell recovered first, letting out a dismissive laugh. "Mr. Thornton, while I appreciate the entertainment, perhaps we should continue our discussion." Robert raised his hand, silencing Powell. "James, check her math." The CFO was already hunched over his laptop, recalculating frantically. The silence stretched as droplets of rain continued their assault on the windows. Finally, James looked up, his face drained of color. "She's right," he whispered. "The formula was applied incorrectly in our valuation model. The difference is—" He paused, swallowing hard. "Approximately 42%. The Nexa Health executives exchanged alarmed glances. Their legal counsel began frantically flipping through documents. "Where did you learn to calculate compound growth?" Robert asked Lily, ignoring the growing tension around the table. "My mom teaches me from used books," Lily answered simply. "I like numbers. They always tell the truth if you listen right." Robert studied the child's face, earnest, unaware of the financial earthquake she had just triggered. He felt a strange mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Mr. Powell," Robert turned to the now visibly uncomfortable CEO, "I believe we need to revisit these projections before proceeding." "This is highly irregular," Powell protested, his confident demeanor cracking. "One calculation discrepancy doesn't invalidate the entire agreement." "Actually," James interjected, gaining confidence, "it affects the fundamental valuation framework. We'd be selling at a massive discount." As the executives began arguing, Sarah Walker burst into the room, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thornton," she apologized breathlessly. "Lily was supposed to stay in the break room. I hope she hasn't disturbed your meeting." The look on Robert's face confused her. It wasn't anger, but something closer to wonder. "Ms. Walker, your daughter may have just saved my company hundreds of millions of dollars," he said quietly. Sarah looked from Robert to Lily, uncomprehending. "I don't understand." Before Robert could explain, Marcus Powell stood abruptly. "We're suspending this discussion pending a full review of the financial models. Our team will be in touch." His words were clipped, professional, but the coldness in his eyes as he glanced at Lily betrayed his fury. As the Nexa Health contingent gathered their materials and filed out, murmuring amongst themselves, Robert turned to Sarah. "I believe we need to talk about your daughter." Sarah instinctively pulled Lily closer to her side, protective. "She's always been good with numbers. Too good sometimes. I've tried to keep it private." Robert nodded, understanding dawning. In a world where exceptional talents were often exploited, a single mother would naturally be protective of a child with extraordinary abilities. "Please, join me in my office tomorrow morning," Robert said. "Both of you. I think we have much to discuss." As they left the private dining room, the rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows. The abandoned acquisition documents lay scattered on the mahogany table, their carefully calculated projections now revealed as fundamentally flawed by a 7-year-old girl who saw what a room full of Harvard MBAs had missed. In his town car heading back to his Beacon Hill mansion, Robert Thornton couldn't stop thinking about Lily Walker. In his 40 years building Thornchem from a small research outfit into a pharmaceutical powerhouse, he had encountered brilliance in many forms. But never had he seen such natural mathematical intuition, especially in a child from such humble circumstances. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from James, from board members, from legal counsel, all demanding to know what had happened and what would happen next. Robert ignored them all, staring instead at the rainy Boston streets sliding past his window. Something significant had occurred tonight, beyond the collapse of a business deal. He felt it in his bones, the way he had felt it when he discovered the compound that became Thornchem's first blockbuster drug, a discovery that changed everything. In his mind, he could still see Lily's small finger tracing invisible calculations in the air, her eyes lit with the pure joy of mathematical truth. It reminded him of something he had lost long ago in the pursuit of corporate success, the simple pleasure of discovery for its own sake. By the time his car pulled up to his mansion, Robert Thornton had made a decision. The merger's collapse would send shockwaves through the pharmaceutical industry tomorrow, but that wasn't what occupied his thoughts. Instead, he was focused on a meeting with a catering assistant and her extraordinary daughter, and the possibilities that might unfold from that unlikely encounter. Sarah Walker's hands trembled as she smoothed Lily's dress for the 5th time. They stood in the gleaming lobby of Thornchem Pharmaceuticals' headquarters in Cambridge, their reflections distorted in the polished marble floor. The 20-story, Glass buildings seemed to pierce the morning sky, a world away from their cramped two-bedroom apartment in Dorchester. "Remember what I said," Sarah whispered, kneeling to meet her daughter's eyes. "Just be polite, answer Mr. Thornton's questions, and—" "Don't show off," Lily finished, her serious brown eyes understanding more than any 7-year-old should. "I know, Mom." Sarah swallowed hard. Since Lily was 3, she had recognized her daughter's extraordinary abilities, the way she organized her blocks by prime numbers, how she calculated tip percentages faster than adults, the complex patterns she saw in everything from wallpaper to traffic signals. Sarah had been both amazed and terrified. Amazed at her daughter's gifts, terrified of what the world might do with them. "Ms. Walker," a polished assistant appeared. "Mr. Thornton will see you now." The elevator ride to the executive floor felt eternal. Sarah had been in this building countless times, catering events in the corporate dining rooms, but never as a guest, never as someone who mattered. Robert Thornton's office occupied the northeast corner of the 20th floor, with panoramic views of the Charles River and Boston skyline. He rose from behind his desk as they entered, his manner notably warmer than during their brief interactions at catered events. "Ms. Walker, Lily, thank you for coming." He gestured toward a seating area away from his desk, deliberately casual. "Would you like something to drink? Hot chocolate for you, perhaps, Lily?" Once they were settled, Robert leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "I want to discuss what happened last night and perhaps more importantly, what happens next." Sarah straightened her back. "Mr. Thornton, first I want to apologize for Lily's interruption. She shouldn't have been in that room and—" "No apology necessary," Robert cut in gently. "Your daughter's intervention was enlightening. Our finance team worked through the night. The calculation error she identified would have undervalued Thornchem by nearly $400 million. Sarah gasped despite herself, and even Lily's eyes widened. "But that's not why I asked you here," Robert continued. "I'm more interested in Lily herself. How long has she shown these mathematical abilities?" Sarah hesitated, years of protective instinct making her cautious. "She's always been quick with numbers. I noticed when she was very young." 3 years, 2 months and 14 days, Lily interjected precisely. "That's when Mom first realized I was different. I was counting ceiling tiles at the hospital where she used to clean." Robert smiled at the exactitude. "And your education, Lily? Your current school?" "Dorchester Elementary," Sarah answered. "They've been accommodating, but they don't have programs for children like Lily." "They give me extra worksheets," Lily added, a hint of frustration in her voice. "But they're just more of the same, not harder." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "I see, and have you considered specialized schools? There are several in Boston that—" "We've considered everything we can afford, Mr. Thornton," Sarah interrupted, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "And everything that wouldn't take her away from me." Understanding dawned in Robert's eyes. He'd heard stories of gifted children whisked away to specialized institutions, becoming more like research subjects than children. For a single mother, working multiple jobs to make ends meet, such fear would be amplified. "I'm not suggesting separating you," he clarified gently. "Quite the opposite, actually. I've been thinking about ways Thornchem might help nurture Lily's talents while keeping your family intact." Before he could elaborate, his office door opened without a knock. James Davidson strode in, followed by Eleanor Richards, Thornchem's chief legal counsel. Their conversation halted abruptly when they noticed Sarah and Lily. "Robert, we need to discuss the Nexa Health situation," James said tersely. "Their legal team is threatening action over the collapsed deal. They're calling it," his eyes flicked to Lily, "deliberate sabotage." Robert's expression hardened. "This is a scheduled meeting, James. We'll discuss Nexa Health later." Eleanor stepped forward, her sharp eyes assessing Sarah and Lily. "Is this the situation from last night?" she asked delicately. "This is Ms. Walker and her daughter Lily," Robert corrected firmly. "And yes, Lily is the mathematical prodigy who identified the calculation error." Eleanor's professional smile didn't reach her eyes. How fortuitous that she happened to be in a private meeting room examining confidential financial documents. Sarah stiffened, her hands clenching in her lap. "What exactly are you implying?" "Nothing at all," Eleanor replied smoothly, just noting the extraordinary coincidence. Robert stood abruptly. That's enough, Eleanor. There was no subterfuge here, just a child with remarkable abilities. James cleared his throat uncomfortably. Robert, you know I'm as impressed as anyone by what happened, but we need to be practical. The board is in crisis mode over the collapsed merger. This is hardly the time to be. He gestured vaguely toward Lily. Distracted by side projects. Side projects? Robert repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. Is that what you call investing? In extraordinary human potential? I call it a liability we can't afford right now, James retorted. You want to risk the company's reputation on some kind of social experiment for a little girl from Dorchester? The room went silent. Sarah stood, taking Lily's hand. We should go, she said tightly. Thank you for your time, Mr. Thornton. Wait, Robert said, his voice cutting through the tension. James, Eleanor, leave us, now! After a tense moment, they complied, though Eleanor cast one last speculative glance at Lily before closing the door. When they were alone again, Robert sighed deeply. I apologize for my colleagues. The collapsed merger has everyone on edge. We understand, Sarah said, though her posture remained defensive. Corporate priorities come first. That's just it, Robert said, moving to look out at the Boston skyline. I'm beginning to question those priorities. He turned back to them, his expression resolute. Ms. Walker, Sarah, I'd like to make you a proposal. Over the next hour, Robert outlined his vision, a foundation for gifted children from underprivileged backgrounds, with Lily as its first beneficiary. Not a charity case, but the beginning of something transformative. Sarah would be offered a position coordinating community outreach, a role that would utilize her intimate knowledge of the challenges facing families like hers. Why? Sarah asked when he finished, still suspicious. Why would you do this? Robert was silent for a long moment. I've been building this company for 40 years, he finally said. I've created medications that help millions. But lately, I've been asking myself what it's all for. Last night, watching Lily solve in seconds what teams of Ivy League analysts missed. It reminded me that true potential isn't dictated by zip codes or bank accounts. Sarah studied him, looking for signs of insincerity or hidden motives. Finding none, she allowed herself to consider his proposal. It seemed too good to be true. Education. For Lily. A stable career for herself, no strings attached. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, Robert agreed. Take the weekend. We can meet again Monday. As they prepared to leave, Robert's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. It seems our story has leaked to the press. Child genius derails pharmaceutical mega-merger. They work fast. Sarah froze, her protective instincts flaring. They named Lily. Not yet, Robert assured her. But it's only a matter of time in this town. On the elevator ride down, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities and dangers. The media attention, the skepticism they would face, the accusations of opportunism that would surely follow. Yet beneath her anxiety ran a current of hope that for the first time, Lily might have the resources to truly flourish. Outside the Thornchem building, a light rain was falling. As they waited for their bus, Lily looked up at the towering glass structure. Mom, she said thoughtfully, do you think Mr. Thornton really wants to help us? Or does he just want to use my brain? The question struck Sarah to her core. So perceptive, so adult, so heartbreakingly cynical for a 7-year-old. She knelt on the wet sidewalk, not caring about the damp soaking through her pants. I don't know for sure, Lilybean, she answered honestly, but I think sometimes people surprise you. Sometimes they're better than the world tells you to expect. Lily considered this, her expression serious. I think I want to trust him, she decided. The numbers in his eyes added up. Sarah smiled at her daughter's peculiar way of assessing people. The numbers in his eyes. The way they changed. When he talked about helping kids like me, Lily explained, they went from subtraction to multiplication. As their bus arrived, Sarah took one last look at the Thornchem building, soaring into the misty Boston sky. Whatever happened next, she knew their lives had irrevocably changed, all because her extraordinary daughter had noticed a mathematical error that a room full of executives had missed. The question now was whether that change would lead to fulfillment or heartbreak. In Sarah's experience, extraordinary gifts often led to both. The Boston Globe headline glared from newsstands throughout the city. Math prodigy topples pharmaceutical merger. Smaller outlets were less restrained. Dorchester girl genius saves billionaire's fortune. By Monday morning, 3 days after the fateful dinner, Lily Walker had become a reluctant local celebrity. Sarah kept Lily home from school, fielding incessant calls from reporters who had somehow obtained their phone number. Outside their apartment building, a small cluster of journalists had gathered, hoping for a glimpse of the calculator kid, as one tabloid had dubbed her. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Sarah muttered, peeking through the blinds at the growing media presence. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert Thornton. "Car being sent, ETA 10 minutes, back entrance." Meanwhile, across the river in Cambridge, Robert faced a different kind of pressure. The Thornchem board had convened an emergency meeting to address the collapsed Nexa Health merger and the media frenzy surrounding it. The atmosphere in the boardroom was tense, with board members divided between those intrigued by the unexpected turn of events and those furious about the lost opportunity. The market opened down 12%, James Davidson reported grimly. Nexa Health is positioning this as a last-minute negotiation tactic gone wrong. They're suggesting we deliberately sabotage the deal to drive up the price. That's absurd, Robert countered. The error was genuine, as our own finance team has confirmed. Be that as it may, interjected Philip Monroe, the longest-serving board member. This child genius narrative is a distraction we don't need. Some outlets are suggesting we stage the whole thing as a publicity stunt. Eleanor Richards nodded in agreement. The optics are problematic. A catering worker's child just happens to save the company hundreds of millions. It strains credibility. Robert felt his patience wearing thin. The circumstances are unusual, yes, but the mathematics are sound. Would you prefer we had proceeded with an undervalued deal? What we would prefer, Philip said coolly, is that you focus on salvaging our stock price and corporate reputation, rather than indulging in some misguided philanthropy project for this girl and her mother. Robert stiffened. News of his proposed foundation had clearly leaked. My personal philanthropic interests are separate from corporate governance. Not when you're using company resources and your position as CEO to advance them, Eleanor countered. Not when they're directly tied to a failed merger that's cost shareholders billions in value. The debate continued for another hour, growing increasingly heated. When Robert finally emerged from the boardroom, he was exhausted but resolute. The board had stopped short of formal action against his plans, but their disapproval was palpable. His executive assistant approached cautiously. "Ms. Walker and her daughter have arrived. They're waiting in your office." Robert took a moment to compose himself before entering. Sarah and Lily sat side by side on his office couch, their posture mirror images of contained anxiety. Despite the circumstances, he couldn't help but smile at the sight of Lily, who was reading what appeared to be a college-level calculus textbook. "Good morning," he greeted them. "I apologize for the cloak-and-dagger approach to getting you here, but I thought you might appreciate avoiding the press." Sarah nodded gratefully. "It's been overwhelming. They're calling her the calculator kid." "I don't like that name," Lily said without looking up from her book. "Calculators just follow instructions." "I see patterns." Robert sat across from them. "You're absolutely right, Lily. And speaking of patterns, I've been thinking about how to proceed with our discussion from Friday." He outlined the plan he had refined over the weekend, declining the Nexa Health merger entirely rather than renegotiating, redirecting a portion of the company's research budget toward establishing the Thornton Foundation for Exceptional Minds, and creating a position for Sarah that would utilize her experience while providing the stability she needed to support Lily's development. The foundation would identify and nurture gifted children from underserved communities, Robert explained. Not just in mathematics, but across disciplines. Lily would be our inspiration, but not our only focus. Sarah listened carefully, her expression cautiously hopeful. "And my role?" "Initially, community outreach coordinator. Do you understand better than anyone the challenges these families face? With time and experience, you could advance to program director. What about school for Lily? Sarah asked. The media attention has made returning to Dorchester Elementary complicated. Robert nodded, understanding. I've arranged an assessment at Cambridge Preparatory Academy. It's one of the best schools in the state for gifted education. They're willing to offer Lily advanced placement with a scholarship that would cover her through high school. Lily looked up from her book for the first time. Would I still live with Mom? The question, so simple yet revealing the child's deepest fear, made Robert's heart ache. Absolutely. You'd commute together. The foundation would provide transportation. Sarah took a deep breath. This all sounds incredible, but why, Mr. Thornton? Why go to these lengths for us? Robert was silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. When I started Thornchem, it was to develop treatments that would help people, real people, not just profit margins. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that purpose. Meeting Lily has been clarifying. Before Sarah could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. James Davidson entered without waiting for permission, his face tight with barely controlled anger. The Nexa Health CEO is giving a press conference, he announced tersely. You need to see this. He turned on the office television, where Marcus Powell was addressing a room full of reporters, his expression grave. While we respect Thornchem's decision to withdraw from our agreement, we find the circumstances highly suspect, Powell was saying. The sudden appearance of a supposed mathematical prodigy, a child with no formal training beyond elementary school, conveniently identifying a complex financial discrepancy just moments before signing. It stretches credibility to the breaking point. Sarah tensed visibly as Powell continued. We have reason to believe this was a calculated maneuver to extract a higher acquisition price. Thornchem's subsequent announcement of a foundation centered around this child only raises further questions about the true nature of their relationship. He's calling us liars, Sarah whispered, instinctively pulling Lily closer. Robert's expression hardened as he watched Powell smoothly cast aspersions on Lily's abilities and his own integrity. When the press conference ended, James turned to Robert with undisguised panic. We need to counter this immediately. Issue a statement. Distance ourselves from the girl. Her name is Lily, Robert interrupted coldly. And we will do no such thing. Robert, be reasonable, James pleaded. This narrative is toxic. The board is already on edge. If we double down now, then what, James? We lose some shareholder value? We disappoint Wall Street analysts? Robert stood, his decision crystallizing. For 40 years I've built this company by following the data, not popular opinion. Lily's mathematical insight is real. The error she identified was real. I won't throw her under the bus to appease Marcus Powell or nervous investors. James stared at him incredulously. You'd risk everything, your legacy, the company's future. For this social experiment? Robert met his gaze steadily. I'm not risking everything. I'm investing in something that matters. After James left, muttering about damage control, Robert turned back to Sarah and Lily. I apologize for that. This situation has become more complicated than I anticipated. Sarah looked troubled. Mr. Thornton, we never meant to cause such disruption. If this is going to damage your company, please call me Robert, he interrupted gently. And don't worry about Thornchem. The company will weather this storm. What matters now is ensuring Lily has the opportunity to develop her extraordinary gifts. As if on cue, Lily spoke up. I solved another one of the problems, she said, pointing to her calculus book. The one about the volume of the rotating function. It's a definite integral. Robert glanced at the college-level problem, impressed. May I see your work? Lily handed him her notebook, filled with meticulous calculations. As Robert reviewed her solution, flawless with an elegant approach he hadn't considered, he felt a renewed certainty about his decision. It's perfect, he told her, genuine admiration in his voice. You have a remarkable mind. Lily. For the first time that day, Lily smiled, a small, shy expression that transformed her serious face into that of the child she was. Later that afternoon, after Sarah and Lily had accepted his proposal and left to prepare for Lily's school assessment the next day, Robert stood at his office window, watching the Boston skyline as the sun began to set. His phone had been buzzing non-stop with calls from board members. Investors and reporters all demanding explanations. He ignored them all, instead sending a single email to his legal team. Proceed with establishment of Thornton Foundation for Exceptional Minds. Priority status. Budget as discussed. Whatever storms lay ahead, with Nexa Health, with his board, with the media, Robert felt more certain of his path than he had in years. In Lily Walker, he had rediscovered something he thought he'd lost: the pure, transformative power of human potential, unbound by circumstance or expectation. As darkness fell over Boston, Robert Thornton made a silent promise to the small mathematical genius who had upended his world. Her gift would not be wasted, her future not limited by the accidents of birth or economics. Whatever it took, whatever it cost him personally, he would ensure that Lily Walker had the chance to become everything she could be. Cambridge Preparatory Academy stood like a fortress of learning among the autumn trees, its red brick buildings and ivy-covered walls projecting an aura of academic prestige that had intimidated generations of students. For 8-year-old Lily Walker, now 3 months into her new educational journey, the imposing campus had become both a sanctuary and a battlefield. The limit as x approaches infinity is -9/2, Lily wrote on the whiteboard, her handwriting precise despite having to stretch to reach the upper portion. Behind her, 20 high school students watched with varying expressions of amazement, resentment, and confusion. Dr. Allison Parker, who taught the advanced placement calculus class, nodded approvingly. "Excellent work, Lily. Can you explain your approach to the asymptotic behavior analysis?" As Lily launched into a detailed explanation of her reasoning, a snicker came from the back row. Ethan Montgomery, son of a prominent Boston banking family, and previously the mathematical star of the sophomore class, whispered something to his friend that made them both laugh. Dr. Parker's eyes narrowed. "Do you have something to contribute, Ethan?" "Just wondering if our new professor is available for private tutoring," Ethan replied with exaggerated politeness. "Or does she have a bedtime?" The class erupted in stifled laughter. Lily's cheeks burned, but she kept her expression neutral, a skill she'd been perfecting since her first day at Cambridge Prep. She had learned quickly that her extraordinary abilities made her as many enemies as friends. "That's enough," Dr. Parker said sharply. "Lily's approach to this problem demonstrates an intuitive understanding of calculus that many college students would envy. I suggest you take notes rather than make comments." When the bell rang, Lily gathered her books quickly, hoping to avoid the usual hallway interactions. But Ethan blocked her path as she tried to leave. "Seriously though, Walker, do you actually think you belong here?" he asked, his voice low enough that Dr. Parker couldn't hear from her desk. "Or are you just Thornton's charity project?" Lily looked up at him, this boy who towered over her physically, but whose mathematical skills she had surpassed years ago. "The numerical evidence suggests I do belong," she answered evenly. "My test scores are 98.7% accurate, and my problem-solving efficiency is 34% higher than the class average." Ethan's face darkened. "You think you're so special because you can crunch numbers, but this isn't just about math. This is about knowing your place." Before the confrontation could escalate, another voice cut in. "Back off, Montgomery." Michael Chen, a quiet junior known for his physics brilliance, stepped between them. "Just because she makes you look average doesn't mean you get to be a jerk." Ethan glared at them both before stalking away, muttering something about freaks sticking together. "Thanks," Lily said quietly, "but I can handle Ethan." Michael shrugged. "Sure you can, but you shouldn't have to." He studied her with genuine curiosity. "How do you do it anyway? See mathematics the way you do?" Lily considered the question seriously. No one had asked her that before, how she experienced numbers, not just what she could do with them. "Numbers have relationships," she tried to explain. "Like families. When I look at an equation, I don't just see symbols. I see connections, patterns, how everything flows together." She paused, frustrated by the inadequacy of words. "It's like music, but instead of hearing it, I see it." Michael nodded slowly. "That's actually really cool. Hey, a bunch of us have a study group after school. You should join." Lily hesitated. Social interactions were still a minefield she was learning to navigate. "I don't know." "Think about it," Michael said, heading to his next class. "We meet in the library, table by the science section." Later that afternoon, Sarah Walker waited outside the school in the Foundation's car, watching students stream out of the buildings. When Lily finally appeared, Sarah immediately noticed something was wrong. Her daughter's shoulders were tense, her expression closed. "Tough day?" Sarah asked as Lily climbed into the car. "Ethan Montgomery said I don't belong here," Lily stated flatly. "He called me a charity project." Sarah felt a familiar surge of protective anger. "That boy needs a lesson in manners. Should I talk to his parents?" "No," Lily exclaimed, horrified at the thought. "That would just make everything worse." She stared out the window as Cambridge's historic buildings slid past. "Maybe he's right, though. Maybe I don't belong here." "Lily Walker," Sarah said firmly, "you belong anywhere your mind takes you. Don't let some privileged kid with a bruised ego tell you otherwise." Lily was quiet for a moment. "There's a study group that meets after school. Michael Chen invited me." Sarah smiled, recognizing this as progress. "That sounds great. We can arrange for later pickup. But what if they're just curious about me? Like I'm some kind of math zoo animal?" Lily's voice betrayed her underlying anxiety. "What if they just want to see the calculator kid up close?" Sarah reached over to squeeze her daughter's hand. "What if they genuinely want to know the amazing Lily Walker? Sometimes you have to take a chance on people, sweetie." The car pulled up to Robert Thornton's Beacon Hill mansion, which had become their regular after-school destination. The historic brownstone had been transformed into an informal learning center, with the formal living room now housing whiteboards, bookshelves, and comfortable study spaces. Robert greeted them at the door, his face lighting up at the sight of Lily despite the visible fatigue of recent weeks. The fallout from the collapsed merger continued to consume much of his time, with Nexa Health pursuing legal action and Thornchem's stock still recovering from the initial shock. "How was school today, mathematician?" he asked, using his nickname for Lily. "Challenging," Lily answered diplomatically. "Not the academics, but the other variables." Robert's expression sobered. He had hoped that Cambridge Prep's progressive reputation would translate to acceptance for Lily, but he understood the social complexities of integrating a child prodigy into high school classes. "Variables can be managed," he said thoughtfully, "sometimes by changing the equation altogether." While Lily settled in the study room to work on her assignments, Robert led Sarah to his home office to discuss foundation business. In her role as community outreach coordinator, Sarah had already identified several promising candidates for the foundation's pilot program, gifted children from disadvantaged backgrounds whose talents might otherwise go unrecognized. "The school in Roxbury has 2 potential students," Sarah reported, "and there's a 9-year-old in East Boston who's teaching himself programming. His mother works 3 jobs and can barely afford internet access, but he's already developing simple apps." Robert nodded approvingly. "Excellent work. How many does that bring our pilot group to?" 7, including Lily," Sarah replied. "But we're facing some resistance from parents. They're suspicious of handouts or worried about their children being used as experiments." "Not surprising," Robert acknowledged. "Trust takes time to build, especially across socio-economic divides." Their discussion was interrupted by the doorbell. Robert's housekeeper admitted Dr. Allison Parker, who had agreed to provide additional mentorship to Lily outside of school hours. "Dr. Parker," Robert greeted her warmly, "thank you for coming. Lily's in the study room." The mathematician smiled. "Happy to be here. Actually, I wanted to speak with both of you first." Her expression grew serious. "There was an incident with Ethan Montgomery today. Nothing physical, but the kind of subtle bullying that's hard for teachers to address effectively." Sarah sighed. "Lily mentioned it. She said he called her a charity project." Dr. Parker nodded grimly. "The Montgomery family has significant influence at Cambridge Prep. Multiple buildings bear their name. Ethan has always been the star mathematics student until Lily arrived." "So this is about jealousy?" Robert asked. "Partly," Dr. Parker confirmed, "but it's also about social hierarchies being disrupted. Cambridge Prep has always claimed to value academic excellence above all, But the reality is more complicated. Old money, connections, legacy admissions, these still carry tremendous weight. Sarah's expression hardened. So my daughter is supposed to make herself smaller to protect a privileged boy's ego? Absolutely not, Dr. Parker said firmly. I'm telling you this so we can strategize. Lily has extraordinary gifts, but she's still a child navigating a complex social environment. She needs allies, not just academic challenges. Robert was thoughtful. What do you suggest? The study group that Michael Chen invited her to would be a good start, Dr. Parker replied. And I'd like to propose something more structured. Weekly sessions here with a small group of students who genuinely want to learn with Lily, not just from her. After Dr. Parker left to work with Lily, Sarah turned to Robert with concern etched on her face. I knew there would be challenges, but I hate seeing her struggle with this. Numbers have always made sense to Lily. People are the difficult variables. Robert nodded, understanding. People are complex equations with constantly changing values. But Lily is adaptable. She'll find her place. I hope so, Sarah said softly. Sometimes I wonder if we've done the right thing, putting her in such an advanced environment so young. You know, Robert mused, when I was building Thornchem, there were countless times I felt out of place, the scholarship kid from South Boston among Ivy League heirs. It was uncomfortable, sometimes painful, but it forced me to grow in ways I wouldn't have otherwise. Later that evening, as Robert worked in his study, he heard laughter from the kitchen, a sound that had become increasingly rare in his home since his wife's departure years earlier. Curious, he followed the sound to find Lily explaining a mathematical concept to his housekeeper, Mrs. Gonzalez, using pasta pieces to demonstrate probability distributions. So if I randomly pick one piece of pasta, Lily was saying, the chance of getting a bow tie is 7 out of 20 or 35%. Mrs. Gonzalez nodded, genuinely engaged. And if you pick 2 pieces? Then it gets more interesting. Lily's eyes lit up as she launched into an explanation of compound probability, arranging the pasta in precise patterns. Robert watched from the doorway, struck by how animated Lily became when sharing knowledge rather than simply displaying it. In that moment, he glimpsed something beyond her computational abilities, a natural teacher's gift for making complex ideas accessible and engaging. Perhaps, he thought, this was the key to helping Lily find her place at Cambridge Prep and beyond, not just as the prodigy who outperformed everyone, but as someone who could translate between the world of abstract mathematics and everyday understanding, building bridges rather than widening gaps. As Lily and Mrs. Gonzalez continued their impromptu pasta-based statistics lesson, Robert made a mental note to discuss this insight with Sarah. The calculator kid label had focused entirely on Lily's ability to process numbers, but her true gift might be her ability to make those numbers meaningful to others, a talent far rarer and potentially more transformative than raw computational power. Winter settled over Boston, transforming the Charles River into a ribbon of ice and dusting Cambridge Prep's venerable buildings with snow. Inside Robert Thornton's Beacon Hill mansion, warmth radiated not just from the crackling fireplace, but from the animated voices of the 12 students gathered in what had once been the formal dining room. So quantum superposition is like pasta sauce before you taste it, Lily explained, standing before a whiteboard covered in equations. At 8.5 years old, she had grown an inch since September and carried herself with growing confidence. It exists in multiple potential states simultaneously. Only when you observe it or taste it does it collapse into one definite state. The high school students gathered around the large table nodded with varying degrees of understanding. This Wednesday afternoon session had become a weekly tradition, part of what the students had dubbed Walker workshops, interdisciplinary explorations led by Lily that connected advanced mathematics to everyday concepts. That actually makes sense, said Jessica Lynn, a junior who excelled in biology but struggled with physics. Way more than Dr. Stevens's explanation about Schrödinger's cat. Michael Chen, who had become Lily's most consistent ally at school, grinned. Lily's pasta metaphors are definitely more appealing than imagining half-dead cats. Even Ethan Montgomery was present, sitting somewhat apart from the others. His attendance had surprised everyone when he first showed up 3 weeks ago, slipping in late and leaving early. Today he was taking notes, his expression thoughtful rather than scornful. As the session concluded and students began gathering their materials, Ethan remained behind, apparently struggling with something internal. Finally, as Lily erased the whiteboard, he approached her. "That thing about quantum states," he said awkwardly. "I've been trying to understand it for months. The way you explained it actually helped." Lily turned, wary but curious. Their relationship had evolved from open hostility to cold détente over recent weeks. "Thanks," she said simply. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I wanted to tell you something. My parents are threatening to transfer me to Phillips Academy if I keep coming to these sessions." "Why?" Lily asked, genuinely confused. "They say it's a waste of time, that I should be focusing on econ and pre-law courses instead." His voice took on a bitter edge. "They've had my whole life planned since before I was born. Montgomery men go to Harvard Law, join the family firm, and eventually run it. End of story." Lily considered this. "What do you want to do?" The question seemed to startle Ethan, as if no one had ever asked him before. "I want to study astrophysics," he admitted quietly. "I've been reading about dark matter theories since I was 12, but my father says that's a charming fantasy that won't sustain the family legacy." Before Lily could respond, Robert entered the room, having overheard the last part of their conversation. "Mr. Montgomery," he said, "I couldn't help overhearing. Your interest in astrophysics is impressive." Ethan stiffened, clearly uncomfortable with the CEO's attention. "It doesn't matter. My parents are right. It's not a practical career path." Robert studied the teenager thoughtfully. "You know, I faced a similar dilemma once. My father wanted me to join his construction business. He never understood my interest in pharmaceutical research, called it playing with chemicals, and warned it would never amount to anything." "But you built Thornchem," Ethan pointed out. "Yes, but my father only began to respect my choices when the company became profitable," Robert said with a hint of old pain. "He never valued the medicines we developed, only the money they generated." Lily, watching this exchange with fascination, suddenly spoke up. "Maybe we should talk to Ethan's parents, not to fight with them, but to show them what we do here." Both Robert and Ethan looked at her in surprise. "They think this is all some kind of make-believe," Lily continued, her logical mind breaking down the problem. "But it's real. What we learn here is real. Maybe they need to see that." Robert's expression softened with admiration for Lily's insight. "That's actually a brilliant approach. Mr. Montgomery, would your parents be willing to attend one of these sessions?" Ethan looked dubious. "They're pretty busy, and pretty convinced they're right about everything." "So was my father," Robert replied with a wry smile. "But sometimes seeing is believing." The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's arrival. She had spent the afternoon at a community center in Roxbury, interviewing families for the Foundation's expanding program. The sight of her daughter engaged in seemingly friendly conversation with Ethan Montgomery, who had caused Lily so many tears in recent months, momentarily stunned her. Later that evening, after Ethan and the other students had departed, Sarah, Robert, and Lily sat in the kitchen over a dinner of Mrs. Gonzalez's lasagna. "Ethan Montgomery wants to be an astrophysicist?" Sarah asked, still processing this revelation. Lily nodded, twirling pasta around her fork. "His parents won't let him. They want him to be a lawyer like his dad and grandpa and great-grandpa." "Familial expectations can be powerful constraints," Robert observed, "sometimes more powerful than financial limitations." Sarah considered this. "It's strange to think of someone with all those privileges feeling trapped, but I guess golden cages are still cages." "Do you think his parents will come if we invite them?" Lily asked. Robert and Sarah exchanged glances. "It's worth trying," Robert said carefully. "But Lily, I want you to be prepared for the possibility that they might not be receptive. The Montgomerys are traditional in their views." "You mean they might not want to listen to a kid from Dorchester?" Lily asked bluntly. Sarah winced at her daughter's directness, but Robert appreciated it. "Unfortunately, yes. Some people have very fixed ideas about who can teach and who should learn." Lily was quiet for a moment, considering this. "Well, their fixed ideas are mathematically unsound," she finally declared, "and I can prove it." The following week brought a new challenge. Dr. William Prescott, the stern, silver-haired headmaster of the prestigious Westfield Academy of Science, arrived at Thorncam's headquarters for a meeting with Robert. The Thornton Foundation had been seeking to establish a partnership with Westfield, hoping to create pathways for foundation students to access its renowned resources and faculty. Robert had anticipated some resistance, but not the flat rejection contained in Dr. Prescott's formal letter, which cited concerns about diluting academic standards and prioritizing social engineering over scientific rigor. "Dr. Prescott," Robert began diplomatically once they were seated in his office, "I appreciate you taking the time to meet in person. I was surprised by your letter." The headmaster's posture remained rigid. "Mr. Thornton, while your philanthropic intentions are commendable, Westfield Academy has maintained its excellence for over a century by adhering to strict standards. Our concern is that your foundation's approach might compromise those standards." "Our approach?" Robert prompted, keeping his tone neutral. "Let's be frank," Prescott said, leaning forward. "This foundation was created around a child who happened to notice a mathematical error. While impressive for her age and background, this hardly constitutes the kind of systematic scientific aptitude Westfield fosters." Robert felt a flash of anger but controlled it. "Have you reviewed the assessment data for our program participants?" "I have," Prescott acknowledged. "And while the raw aptitude is sometimes present, true genius must be molded by established structures, not by what some might call popular revolution in education. Children from disadvantaged backgrounds often lack the foundational disciplines that enable scientific thinking to flourish." At that moment, Sarah knocked and entered with a folder of materials they had prepared for the meeting. Robert introduced her as the Foundation's Community Outreach Coordinator. "Ms. Walker," Prescott acknowledged with polite disinterest, "I understand your daughter is the catalyst for this initiative." "Yes," Sarah replied evenly. "Lily is one of our students, but the Foundation serves many gifted children who simply lack access to appropriate educational resources." "A noble sentiment," Prescott said dismissively. "But access without proper foundation often leads to frustration rather than achievement. True scientific genius requires not just raw talent, but cultural context, historical perspective, philosophical grounding, elements rarely found in underprivileged environments." Sarah's expression remained professional, but Robert could see the tension in her shoulders. "With respect, Dr. Prescott, that sounds dangerously close to suggesting that scientific ability is determined by zip code rather than neural capacity." "Not determined. Ms. Walker, cultivated." Prescott's tone was patronizing. "Just as fine wine requires specific growing conditions, true intellectual excellence requires the right environment, typically one cultivated over generations." Robert had heard enough. "Dr. Prescott, I invited you here hoping to build bridges between our organizations. Instead, you've made it clear that your definition of merit is inextricably tied to privilege. I'm simply being realistic about—" "You're being elitist," Robert interrupted, his patience exhausted. "And you're wrong. Some of the most revolutionary scientific insights throughout history have come from people who operated outside the established structures, people who questioned assumptions precisely because they weren't indoctrinated by them." The meeting concluded shortly thereafter, with Prescott reiterating his decision and Robert promising that their paths would cross again under different circumstances. After the headmaster departed, Sarah slumped into a chair in Robert's office. "So that's what sophisticated discrimination sounds like." "Unfortunately, yes," Robert agreed, his expression grim. "Prescott represents an entrenched perspective that equates privilege with potential. It's an old story, but one we're working to rewrite." The following evening, to everyone's surprise, Jonathan and Victoria Montgomery accepted the invitation to observe a Walker workshop session. They arrived at Robert's mansion precisely on time, their expensive clothes and reserved demeanor creating an immediate atmosphere of formality. "Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery," Robert greeted them warmly. "Thank you for coming. I believe you know Sarah Walker, our community outreach coordinator. And of course you've heard about Lily." Victoria Montgomery's gaze fell on Lily, assessing her with the cool detachment of someone evaluating a curiosity rather than meeting a child. "Yes, Ethan has mentioned your sessions." The workshop proceeded with Lily leading a discussion on mathematical patterns in music, demonstrating how Bach's compositions could be expressed in equations. The regular students participated enthusiastically, while the Montgomerys observed from the periphery, occasionally exchanging glances. The moment of transformation came unexpectedly when Ethan raised his hand to contribute an insight connecting harmonic frequencies to astronomical phenomena, specifically the resonance patterns in Saturn's rings. "The mathematical relationship is nearly identical," he explained, briefly forgetting his parents' presence as he sketched a diagram on the whiteboard. "It's like the solar system is playing the same harmony as Bach, just at a cosmic scale." The passion and intelligence in his explanation was undeniable. For a fleeting moment, Victoria Montgomery's composed expression softened with something like pride, mingled with surprise, as if seeing her son clearly for the first time. After the session, as students gathered their belongings, Jonathan Montgomery approached Robert and Sarah. "This is not what I expected," he admitted reluctantly. "What did you expect, Mr. Montgomery?" Sarah asked. "Frankly, a glorified tutoring program, perhaps with some social justice messaging thrown in." He glanced toward Ethan, who was engaged in animated conversation with Michael and Lily about cosmic resonance patterns. "I didn't expect to see my son discussing astrophysics with such conviction." "Ethan has a remarkable mind for theoretical concepts," Robert observed. "His understanding of cosmic phenomena is intuitive in ways that can't be taught." Victoria joined them, her expression still guarded, but less dismissive. "The Montgomery men have been attorneys for 4 generations. Mr. Thornton, it's a tradition that has served our family well." "With respect, Mrs. Montgomery," Sarah interjected gently, "traditions should serve people, not the other way around." The conversation continued as they moved to Robert's study, away from the departing students. The Montgomerys were not immediately converted. Years of expectations and social positioning couldn't be undone in a single evening, but a door had been opened. They agreed with visible reservation to consider allowing Ethan to pursue more science courses alongside his pre-law curriculum. As the Montgomerys prepared to leave, Ethan lingered behind. "Thank you," he said quietly to Lily, "for suggesting this." Lily nodded, her expression serious. "Quantum superposition applies to people too, Ethan. You exist in multiple potential states until you decide which one to actualize." For once, Ethan didn't have a sarcastic comeback. He simply nodded, a mixture of hope and uncertainty in his eyes, before following his parents out into the snowy Boston night. Spring bloomed across Boston, dotting the public garden with tulips and drawing students from their winter hibernation to sprawl on Harvard Yard's greening lawns. For the Thornton Foundation, the changing season brought its own kind of flowering, the culmination of their pilot year and preparation for a major expansion. Inside the Phillips Auditorium at Harvard University, 9-year-old Lily Walker stood at the podium, her dark curls pulled back in a neat ponytail, addressing an audience that included academics, philanthropists, community leaders, and families from across Boston's diverse neighborhoods. "Applied mathematics isn't just about solving abstract problems," she explained, her voice clear and confident, despite the imposing setting. "It's about using numerical tools to address real-world challenges." Behind her, our screen displayed a graph charting the progress of the Foundation's 23 pilot participants over the past 6 months. The upward trajectory was unmistakable, a 45% average improvement across standardized assessments, with even more significant gains in areas of each student's specific talent. "But these numbers, while impressive, don't tell the whole story," Lily continued, clicking to a slide showing photographs of Foundation activities. "They don't capture the curiosity that ignites when a student discovers their own capability. They don't measure the growth in self-confidence when someone who's always been told no suddenly hears yes. You can." And they certainly don't quantify the kindness that emerges when people from different backgrounds recognize each other's humanity. In the front row, Sarah watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and amazement. Beside her sat Robert, who had fought numerous battles with his board, with skeptical institutions, with the media, to bring them to this moment. The foundation had weathered its share of storms, including an ongoing lawsuit from Nexa Health alleging corporate malfeasance in the collapsed merger. But today was about celebrating success, not dwelling on challenges. As we look to the future, Lily concluded, our goal isn't just to identify mathematical or scientific talent. It's to create environments where every kind of intelligence can flourish. Because talent doesn't depend on zip code, family name, or bank account. It's everywhere, waiting to be recognized and nurtured. Thank you. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. As Lily stepped away from the podium, Dr. Diana Miller, the newly appointed president of the Foundation's academic board, took her place to outline the expansion plans for the coming year. With funding secured for 3 community learning centers across Boston and partnerships established with 6 universities, the Foundation was poised to serve over 100 students. After the formal presentations concluded, the event transitioned to a reception where Foundation students demonstrated projects they had developed throughout the year. In one corner, 12-year-old Marcus Washington from Roxbury explained his urban garden design that used mathematical modeling to maximize food production in limited spaces. Nearby, the Chen twins from Chinatown demonstrated a language learning algorithm they had developed to help their grandmother improve her English. Robert moved through the crowd, greeting donors and addressing questions, when he noticed a familiar but unexpected face, Dr. William Prescott, the Westfield Academy headmaster who had so dismissively rejected their partnership proposal months earlier. Dr. Prescott, Robert acknowledged, keeping his tone neutral. I'm surprised to see you here. The older man looked distinctly uncomfortable. I received an invitation from Dr. Miller. She suggested I might find the presentations enlightening. And have you? Robert asked directly. Prescott hesitated. I'll admit the results are impressive. More so than I anticipated. Before Robert could respond, they were joined by Jonathan Montgomery, who had become an unlikely ally in recent months after witnessing his son's transformation. Ethan had gradually shifted from pre-law to a mixed curriculum that included advanced physics and astronomy, a compromise his parents had accepted with growing grace. Prescott, Montgomery nodded coolly to the headmaster. I trust you've been observing the Foundation's work with an open mind. Prescott straightened defensively. I've always maintained that exceptional talent deserves nurturing. My concerns were about methodology, not intent. Of course, Montgomery replied with polite skepticism. Though as an attorney, I've learned that intent is often revealed through action rather than rhetoric. As the men exchanged verbal jabs disguised as pleasantries, Sarah approached Lily, who had been surrounded by attendees asking questions about her presentation. Need a break? Sarah asked quietly, recognizing the signs of her daughter's social fatigue despite her poised exterior. Lily nodded gratefully. Just for a minute. They slipped out a side door onto a small terrace overlooking Cambridge. The spring air was crisp but pleasant, carrying the scent of flowering trees from the nearby common. You were amazing in there, Sarah said, smoothing a stray curl from her daughter's forehead. How do you feel? Lily considered the question with her characteristic thoughtfulness. Proud, not just of me, but of everyone. Marcus's garden design is actually more innovative than anything I've done. Sarah smiled at her daughter's genuine appreciation of others' talents, a quality that had deepened as she'd worked alongside the Foundation's growing cohort of students. You've come a long way from the girl who was afraid to show what she knows. Remember when I tore up my notebook after that first day at Cambridge Prep? Lily asked, recalling the moment she had wanted to hide her abilities to avoid standing out. I was so scared of being different. And now? Now I know that different isn't wrong. It's just different. Lily gazed at the Harvard buildings surrounding them. Mom, I think I want to be a teacher someday. Not just to show people mathematics, but to help them find their own ways of seeing the world. Sarah felt a surge of emotion at her daughter's words. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by Ethan Montgomery, who approached with uncharacteristic hesitancy. Sorry to bother you, he said, but there's someone who wants to meet Lily. Dr. Elena Vasquez from MIT's mathematics department. Lily's eyes widened. Dr. Vasquez was a renowned mathematician whose work on computational theory had pioneered new approaches to artificial intelligence. As they re-entered the auditorium, Sarah noticed Robert engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with Dr. Prescott and several Foundation board members. She guided Lily toward the group that had formed around Dr. Vasquez while keeping an eye on the discussion across the room. "Lily Walker," Dr. Vasquez greeted with genuine warmth, "your presentation was impressive. I particularly appreciated your emphasis on the human elements of mathematical education." While Lily engaged with the mathematician, Sarah edged closer to Robert's conversation, catching fragments that suggested a significant development was unfolding. "Reconsidered our position in light of the demonstrable outcomes," Prescott was saying, his tone formal but conciliatory. "Westfield Academy would be open to establishing a limited partnership for the coming academic year." Robert's expression remained measured, though Sarah could detect the satisfaction beneath his professional demeanor. "That's encouraging to hear, Dr. Prescott, though I should mention that we've already finalized our institutional partnerships for the next cycle." Prescott looked genuinely startled. "Surely there's room for flexibility. Westfield could offer resources that few other institutions can match." "6 months ago, that offer would have been eagerly accepted," Robert acknowledged. "But circumstances have evolved. We've established relationships with partners who recognized our students' potential from the beginning, partners who didn't need to be convinced of their worthiness." The headmaster's face reddened slightly. "Mr. Thornton, I'm attempting to extend an olive branch. Surely you're not rejecting Westfield out of spite." "Not spite, Dr. Prescott, principle." Robert's tone remained even. "The Foundation's mission is to recognize talent wherever it exists, and to partner with institutions that share that vision fundamentally, not conditionally. Should Westfield wish to demonstrate a genuine commitment to that philosophy over time, we'd certainly reconsider." As Prescott absorbed this unexpected rejection, Sarah felt a mixture of admiration and concern. Robert was taking a bold stand, but potentially making a powerful enemy in Boston's close-knit educational establishment. The reception continued for another hour, with various demonstrations and conversations flowing throughout the space. One particularly moving moment came when a group of parents who had initially been skeptical of the Foundation approached Robert and Sarah. "We need to apologize," said Mrs. Diaz, whose son Carlos had been among the first students recruited from East Boston. "We thought this was either charity or exploitation. We couldn't imagine why someone like you would care about kids from our neighborhoods." "And now," Sarah asked gently. "Now we understand it was neither," Mr. Washington, Marcus's father, replied. "It was recognition. You saw what others missed, including sometimes us as parents. You saw our children's potential." As the event wound down, Robert found himself momentarily alone, watching the interactions across the auditorium. Dr. Miller approached, her expression thoughtful. "Quite a success," she observed, "though I noticed your conversation with Prescott. That was a bold move." Robert shrugged slightly. "Perhaps, but necessary, I think. Institutions need to understand that talent doesn't require their validation to exist." Dr. Miller nodded in agreement. "Speaking of institutions, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you. I've received an interesting proposal from Harvard's Education Department. They're launching a new course on mathematics and social justice, and would like Lily to participate as a guest lecturer." Robert raised an eyebrow. "At 9 years old, that's unprecedented." "Everything about Lily is unprecedented," Dr. Miller pointed out. "But I wanted to run it by you before approaching Sarah. It would be a significant platform, but also a significant exposure." Robert considered this. "Let's discuss it with them together. It should be Lily's decision ultimately." Later, as the last guests departed and Foundation staff began clearing the space, Robert, Sarah, and Lily sat in a quiet corner of the now empty auditorium. Dr. Miller had just finished explaining Harvard's invitation, leaving Lily looking thoughtful and Sarah visibly conflicted. "It's an incredible opportunity," Sarah acknowledged. "But you're 9, Lily. Guest lecturing at Harvard is a lot." Lily nodded slowly. "I know, and I'm honored they asked." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "But I think I think I want to say no, at least for now." Robert and Dr. Miller exchanged surprised glances. "May I ask why?" Dr. Miller inquired gently. "Because I'm still learning," Lily explained. "Not just mathematics, but how to be a person. I want to finish regular school, play volleyball with my friends, argue about homework, normal kid stuff." She looked at her mother. "Is that okay?" Sarah felt a rush of emotion. In this moment, her extraordinary daughter was showing wisdom beyond her years, not by accepting every opportunity that came her way, but by recognizing the value of childhood itself. "It's more than okay," Sarah assured her, squeezing her hand. "It's exactly right." As they gathered their things to leave, Lily paused by the podium where she had given her presentation, looking out at the empty seats. "One day I'll be ready for Harvard," she said softly, almost to herself. "But not because I'm the smartest. Because I'll have something worthwhile to teach." Robert, overhearing, smiled to himself. In that simple statement was the essence of what the foundation sought to nurture, not just intellectual brilliance, but the wisdom to use it meaningfully. Outside, the spring twilight had settled over Cambridge, turning the sky a deep blue against which the illuminated windows of Harvard's buildings glowed like constellations. Sarah, Robert, and Lily walked together toward the waiting car, their shadows stretching long across the ancient brick pathways of America's oldest university. "What happens next?" Lily asked, looking up at the adults. "Next," Robert replied thoughtfully, "we build on what we've started. The summer program in July, the new learning centers in the fall, one step at a time." "And you?" Sarah asked him, curious about his personal plans. The foundation had consumed most of his time outside Thorncombe for months. Robert considered the question. "I find myself increasingly drawn to this work. The pharmaceutical research will always be important to me, but nurturing human potential. There's something uniquely fulfilling about it." As they reached the car, a familiar figure approached, Ethan Montgomery, slightly out of breath as if he had run to catch them. "Sorry," he said, "but I wanted to tell you before you left. I talked to my parents. They've agreed to let me apply to MIT's summer astrophysics program." His face broke into a rare, genuine smile. "And my dad is going to join the Foundation's legal advisory committee. He said someone needs to keep an eye on Dr. Prescott and his educational old guard." The news was unexpected, but welcome. Another small victory in the larger mission of transforming how talent was recognized and nurtured. As they bid Ethan goodbye and settled into the car, Robert couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come from that rainy night when a 7-year-old girl had spotted a mathematical error that changed everything. What had begun as an impulsive act of recognition had evolved into something far more significant, a movement that was gradually reshaping Boston's educational landscape, opening doors that had long been closed to children from certain backgrounds, and challenging entrenched assumptions about where brilliance could be found. And at the center of it all was Lily Walker, who had just demonstrated wisdom beyond her years by choosing to protect her childhood, even as the adult world clamored for her participation. In that choice, Robert saw the true promise of their work, not just identifying exceptional talents, but nurturing complete human beings who would use those talents with wisdom and purpose. 10 years later, the summer sun cast long shadows across the freshly painted building in Dorchester. Once an abandoned community center, the 3-story structure now gleamed with purpose, its renovated facade bearing the name Walker Thornton Academy for Mathematical Innovation. A steady stream of people flowed through the entrance, dressed in summer finery, voices buzzing with anticipation. Inside the main hall, 20-year-old Lily Walker stood before a mirror, adjusting the cap on her dark curls, now grown into a cascade of spirals that framed her face. Her reflection showed a young woman with the same serious eyes she'd had as a child, but now complemented by a confident posture and serene expression that spoke of hard-won wisdom. "Need help with that?" Sarah Walker appeared in the doorway, elegant in a blue dress that complemented her silver-streaked hair. At 45, she carried herself with the assurance of someone who had found her true calling, now serving as National Program Director for the Thornton Foundation, overseeing initiatives in 12 cities across the country. Lily smiled at her mother in the mirror. "Just nervous." Good, nervous. You've given speeches to rooms full of PhDs, Sarah reminded her, stepping forward to straighten Lily's cap. This should be easy by comparison. That's different, Lily countered. This is personal. This building, this neighborhood, where we started. She turned to face her mother directly. Did you ever imagine we'd end up here when I crashed that business dinner 10 years ago? Sarah laughed softly. Not in my wildest dreams. I was just trying to keep you from getting us both fired. Their moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Robert Thornton entered, his hair now completely silver but his eyes as bright and engaged as ever. At 72, he had gradually stepped back from day-to-day operations at Thornchem, focusing his energy on the foundation that had become his legacy. The auditorium is filled to capacity, he announced, and the satellite locations are streaming the ceremony live. Boston, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, all connected and waiting. Lily took a deep breath. I guess it's time. The three of them made their way through the building's corridors, passing classrooms equipped with state-of-the-art technology, collaborative spaces designed for group learning, and walls covered with student artwork that incorporated mathematical themes. This academy, the flagship of what had become a national network of learning centers, represented the physical manifestation of a vision that had begun with a simple recognition of talent in an unexpected place. As they approached the auditorium, they were joined by Ethan Montgomery, now 30 years old and sporting the casual confidence of someone who had found his true path. After completing his doctorate in astrophysics at MIT, he had divided his time between research at Harvard's Center for Astrophysics and teaching at the Foundation's academies. Ready for the big moment, Dr. Walker? He asked with a grin, using Lily's newly earned title. At 20, she had become the youngest person ever to complete dual degrees in mathematics and education from MIT. As ready as I'll ever be, Lily replied, returning his smile. Their relationship had evolved from adversaries to allies to genuine friends, a transformation that mirrored the broader changes the Foundation had catalyzed throughout Boston's educational landscape. The auditorium fell silent as they entered, all eyes turning to watch the four figures make their way to the stage. Seated in the front rows were the Foundation's first students, now college students or young professionals themselves, alongside current participants, community leaders, educators, and families from across the city. Dr. Diana Miller, now serving as Chancellor of the Foundation's growing network of academies, stepped to the podium to begin the ceremony. 10 years ago, she began, a 7-year-old girl noticed a mathematical error that saved a pharmaceutical company hundreds of millions of dollars. But the real value of that moment wasn't financial. It was in the recognition that extraordinary talent can emerge from any background, any neighborhood, any circumstance, if given the opportunity to flourish. As Dr. Miller continued her introduction, Sarah squeezed Lily's hand, remembering the frightened little girl who had once torn pages from her notebook, afraid to show her brilliance to a world that might not welcome it. That girl was gone, replaced by a young woman who had not only embraced her own gifts, but dedicated herself to helping others discover theirs. When it was Lily's turn to speak, she approached the podium with measured steps, surveying the packed auditorium with a calm gaze. When I was 7, she began, her voice clear and steady, I saw numbers differently than most people. I still do, but what I've learned over the past decade is that everyone sees something differently, whether it's numbers or music or words or the natural world. That unique perspective is where innovation begins. She gestured to the space around them. This academy isn't just about mathematics, though that remains my personal passion. It's about creating spaces where different ways of seeing and thinking are valued, where talent isn't defined by standardized metrics, but by the unique contributions each person can make. As Lily continued her address, outlining the Academy's approach and philosophy, Robert found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The challenges had been numerous, from Nexa Health's lawsuit, eventually settled out of court, to resistance from educational institutions unwilling to change their established practices. But the successes had been even more significant. The Foundation's approach, identifying gifted students from underserved communities and providing them with tailored educational opportunities while keeping them connected to their families and communities, had proven remarkably effective. Studies had documented not just academic achievements, but positive ripple effects throughout participating neighborhoods, as students brought their knowledge and confidence back to their communities. "This academy belongs to Dorchester," Lily was saying, approaching the emotional heart of her speech. "It stands in the neighborhood where I grew up, where my mother worked multiple jobs to keep us afloat, where I first discovered my love for mathematics through second-hand textbooks. This isn't about bringing opportunity to Dorchester. It's about recognizing the brilliance that has always been here, waiting to be nurtured." In the audience, familiar faces reflected the foundation's impact. Michael Chen, now completing medical school, sat beside his sister Jessica, who had become a biomedical engineer. Marcus Washington, whose urban garden project had evolved into a citywide initiative, nodded in appreciation of Lily's words. Carlos Diaz, whose programming skills had earned him a position at a leading tech company, recorded the speech on his tablet. Dr. William Prescott was notably absent, having retired several years earlier, replaced by a more progressive leadership at Westfield Academy that had eventually established a partnership with the foundation. But Jonathan and Victoria Montgomery were present. Their initial skepticism, long since transformed into active support, with Jonathan now serving as head of the foundation's legal team. As the ceremony continued, with the official ribbon cutting and tours of the new facility, Robert found a quiet moment with Sarah away from the crowds. "Did you ever imagine this when you brought Lily to that dinner?" he asked, echoing the question Lily had posed earlier. Sarah shook her head, watching from across the room as her daughter engaged animatedly with a group of young students. "Never. I was just trying to keep my job and take care of my daughter. I never dreamed she would change so many lives, including yours." Robert smiled reflectively. "She changed everything, not just by spotting that calculation error, but by being exactly who she is. She made me question what really matters, what success actually means." The grand opening continued into the evening, transitioning from formal ceremony to community celebration. Food trucks lined the street outside. Local musicians performed, and the academy's spaces filled with laughter and conversation as current and former students mingled with families and supporters. In the mathematics lab, Lily found herself surrounded by a group of children, the youngest participants in the foundation's programs. One little girl, no more than 6, tugged at her sleeve. "Dr. Walker, is it true you were my age when you fixed a big company's mistake?" she asked, eyes wide with wonder. Lily knelt to meet her at eye level. "I was a little older, 7, but yes, I noticed a pattern that others had missed." "What patterns do you notice, Sophia?" The girl's face lit up at being asked. "I see shapes in music. When my mom plays different songs, they make different colors and shapes in my head. That's called synesthesia," Lily explained gently. "It's a special way of experiencing the world. Have you ever tried drawing what you see when you hear music?" As Sophia eagerly described her perceptions, Lily caught sight of Ethan watching from the doorway with an appreciative smile. After the child rejoined her friends, he approached. "You're a natural teacher," he observed. "That's always been your real gift, even more than the mathematical abilities." Lily considered this. "I think they're connected. Understanding patterns helps me understand people, how different minds work, how to build bridges between different ways of thinking." Their conversation was interrupted by Robert, who appeared with an unexpected announcement. "The summer science camp has received final approval. 6 weeks at the Ocean Research Center on Cape Cod, with mornings of study and afternoons at the beach, just as we discussed." The news elicited cheers from the students who overheard. For many of them, it would be their first experience of the ocean despite living just miles from the Atlantic coast. As evening fell, the celebration continued under strings of lights, illuminating the academy's courtyard. Sarah found Lily sitting on a bench slightly removed from the festivities, watching the interactions with thoughtful eyes. "Taking a moment?" Sarah asked, joining her. Lily nodded. "Just absorbing it all. Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed since that night at La Maison." "You've worked incredibly hard," Sarah reminded her. "Your success isn't just luck or talent, it's determination and purpose." "We've worked hard," Lily corrected gently. "You never let me forget where we came from, but you never let me believe it limited where we could go." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as Robert engaged with a group of foundation students, his hands animated as he described some scientific concept. Despite his wealth and position, he had developed a remarkable ability to connect with children from all backgrounds, listening to their ideas with genuine interest and responding without condescension. "He found his true calling through you," Sarah observed, following Lily's gaze. "Building Thornchem gave him success, but this work has given him fulfillment." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "We all found something we needed. You found a way to help families like ours. I found a way to use my abilities that feels meaningful. Ethan found the courage to follow his passion for astrophysics. Even the Montgomerys found a purpose beyond maintaining their family legacy." As if summoned by her words, Ethan approached with 2 glasses of lemonade, offering them to Lily and Sarah before sitting beside them. "The first group of students is already asking about applying to the summer astrophysics program," he reported with satisfaction. "Several show real promise." The conversation turned to plans for the coming academic year, new programs, curriculum enhancements, community partnerships. As they talked, Robert joined them, completing the circle that had formed that rainy night a decade earlier when a 7-year-old girl had noticed a mathematical error that changed the trajectory of all their lives. "I've been thinking," Robert said during a lull in the conversation, "about that calculation error, the compound annual growth rate that was applied incorrectly. In a way, it was the perfect metaphor for what we've been doing these past 10 years. "How so?" Ethan asked, intrigued. "Compound growth isn't linear, it's exponential," Robert explained. "Each period builds on the accumulated value of all previous periods. That's exactly what happens when you invest in human potential. The returns don't just add up, they multiply across generations." Lily smiled, appreciating the mathematical parallel. "And unlike financial investments, human potential has no theoretical upper limit." As the celebration continued around them, the 4 sat together in a moment of shared understanding. 4 people from vastly different backgrounds who had found common purpose in recognizing and nurturing the spark of brilliance wherever it appeared. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the cleanup crews had finished their work, Lily walked alone through the quiet hallways of the academy that bore her name. In one of the classrooms, she paused before a whiteboard where a student had written a note during the tours. "One day I'll be among the greats, not because I'm the smartest, but because I'm the most compassionate." Lily traced the words with her finger, smiling at the echo of her own childhood aspiration. The journey from that rainy night at La Maison to this moment had been filled with challenges, setbacks, and triumphs. But through it all, one truth had remained constant. The most powerful equation wasn't found in any textbook, but in the transformation that occurred when talent met opportunity, when potential was recognized regardless of its origin. As she turned out the lights and prepared to leave, Lily glanced once more at the classroom, where future generations would discover their own mathematical journeys.